Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Nicolette Lee. I'm currently a fifth year at Berkeley's Sociology PhD program, and just wanted to thank all of you for joining us for the Graduate Diversity Admissions Fair and this plenary session on overcoming imposter syndrome when applying to grad school. So we'll be getting started at around 12:05, just to give everyone time to make it into the webinar. So yeah, we'll just be waiting a couple minutes, but thanks everyone for coming. All right, everyone, it's about 12:05, so we're gonna get started. Thanks to all again for joining us as we're talking about overcoming imposter syndrome today. I just wanted to introduce myself again for anyone who's just joined in the last couple minutes. My name is Nicolette Lee. I use they, she pronouns. I attended Brown University for undergrad, and I'm currently here at Berkeley in the sociology department for my PhD, my fifth year. As an additional reminder, live captioning is available and the session is being recorded. So as questions come up for you, please put them in the Q&A. It might not be possible for us to address everyone's questions, but you can always reach out to the Office of Graduate Diversity at graddiversity@berkeley.edu or any of our diversity and community fellows' office hours, and I'll be putting a link in the chat for that. DCF fellows are kind of helpful people in various fields here that can answer your various questions. But before we dive in, just want to introduce our various panelists today. So first, we have Nathaniel Gardner, PhD student in nuclear engineering. Alyssa Jimenez, sorry if I pronounced anyone's names wrong, a PhD student in molecular and cellular biology, and Manpreet Singh, a master's student in social welfare, strengthening children, youth, and family specialization. So I would just like for everyone else to introduce themselves. So you can follow my general pattern: names, pronouns if you'd like, your undergrad institution, and your department and program. I guess we could start with Nathaniel since you're in order.
Sounds good. I'm Nathaniel Gardner. I'm a third year PhD student in nuclear engineering. I'm an OGD fellow, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And also I went to Howard University for my undergrad.
All right. Hi, guys. My name is Alyssa Jimenez. I am a second year PhD student in the molecular and cell bio program here at Cal. I use she, her pronouns. I did my undergrad at Cal State Long Beach, and I am a diversity and community fellow here at Berkeley.
All right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And hi to all the potential bears coming in. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Manpreet Singh. I'm a second year Master's of Social Welfare student here at UC Berkeley. Yeah, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with y'all because it's so important. And yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you to our amazing panelists and fellows. So just before getting to our questions, I want everyone to be on the same page about what imposter syndrome, or the phenomenon of imposter phenomenon, is. So it was originally coined in 1978 by two women psychologists. Imposter syndrome or phenomenon was conceptualized as an experience of high achieving women. So thinking that people have an exaggerated view of your abilities, the fear of being exposed as a fraud, and the continuous tendency to downplay your achievements. Since then, it has been expanded to apply to many people with different identities, and some articles stating over 70% of people having experienced it at least once, which will bring us to our first question. So just to get the question started, I'm going to address our panelists with the first question. So could you tell us about a time you experienced imposter syndrome, and how did it affect you, and how did you overcome it? So you guys can go in order if you want, or just popcorn.
Yeah, I can speak on it just super briefly. So one, the most recent memory I have of just running into this feeling of imposter syndrome was actually quite recently. It was when I first got word that I was admitted here into Berkeley. And around the same time, I also got the list of names for people who were admitted into my program. We also had like a mixer where we could get to know our cohort mates and our professors. And it was really during this time that I noticed that I was one of 3 Filipino students in my current cohort, and I was the only Filipina in my cohort. So I wrote my personal statement of purpose, really surrounding my culture and background and how growing up as a first generation Filipino American impacted why I wanted to get into science. But when I actually attended the mixer and saw that list of names, I was thinking like, oh man, maybe they just wanted to tick off like the Filipino label in their roster to have a more diverse class, even though I already know and I continue to validate for myself that I've done really good science in the past and I am confident in my abilities. But there was just that moment of like, oh, I'm the only one in this class who is like me. Maybe there's kind of an undercurrent of trying to fulfill a roster here that is totally unrelated to the science I've done before, which I know is untrue, but you know, those feelings still occur, and I think that was an experience for me.
Absolutely a relatable feeling. of racial identity for sure. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
I'll say, I guess for me, it was kind of like the most recent one was like my first like presentation as a grad student here. I was at a conference, like an oral presentation, and I'm like, okay, someone's gonna ask me a question, I'm gonna have no idea to answer it. And everybody's gonna kind of like laugh or like say, oh wow, yeah, it's no idea what he's talking about, which I do feel like I have no idea what I'm talking about sometimes. But I just like that kind of like since even though I spent like the past like year working on this data, studying, reading up on it, and I should know good enough about it, everybody will kind of see me as like, oh, he doesn't know anything about it, no matter like even yeah, he's just a student or he's just talking about it. He doesn't really know what he's doing. So that was kind of my experience, just kind of like what people will think about me.
Yeah, and I can share as well. So I think for me, coming into the Masters of Social Welfare program was really important for the opportunity to be able to have my own practice and be my own boss. And so I've always felt a little bit uneasy in the workplace. However, in order to graduate with a master's in social welfare, you have to complete an internship, and you have to complete two internships actually, one for your first year, one for your second year. And I remember going into my first year internship, I felt so nervous. I felt like I was a therapist at a school site, and I hold therapists in really high regard. And I felt like I wouldn't be able to fill in those shoes. Um, School sites are often notorious for not being the most stable as well. And so I kind of went into it and was kind of thrown to the wolves, so to speak. And it felt really overwhelming, and it felt like I was kind of flailing and doing my best, and also feeling like, am I doing anything at all? And then flash forward a year later, I'm at a completely different internship site, and I have a completely different environment that I'm working in with a team that has really taken me on and supported me in shadowing and learning from them. So it's given the experience has given me the opportunity to reflect and realize that there were some factors externally that were impacting the way that I felt as an imposter, and also allowing me to reflect internally as well. Like, what do I do when this feeling shows up? And just because I feel this feeling, does that mean it's true, or does that, or can I question it and challenge it?
Yeah, thank you all of you for some great insights. I can also share an experience I had recently. I'm currently a GSI, or a TA that people normally call them, here in the sociology department. And I'm constantly feeling like I actually don't know what I'm talking about, despite having like years and years of training of these topics. I'm teaching sociology theory, which I started reading 8 years ago, and I still don't always feel confident that I know what I'm talking to them about. Even though people like, I know that I have the skills, but I think when you're occupying like a racialized identity, a low income identity, or maybe whatever kind of challenged identity that you possess, it can kind of stack up and make you feel even less confident about your abilities. So I had to really sit with that and be like, I feel like you actually do know what's going on. Like, you've already taught this class even before. So even like 5 years into a program, like, this imposter syndrome can still really creep up on you. So even though it can be difficult to work through, it's also not surprising for it to kind of hang on. But moving on, just to get to another question. I know someone in the chat asked, what's it like to be a first-gen student at Berkeley? I'm an undocumented first-generation student, and I'm wondering what it's like to be at UC Berkeley. I graduated from Merced, so applying to UC Berkeley could be very scary. I'm not first gen, so if any of you are, I'm sure they'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic.
I can go first quickly to try and answer Abel's question. I think a very special part of UC Berkeley is that there is a wealth of resources for first-gen students. And even in singular grad programs, you'll find that a good fraction of students are also first-gen. So you'll be able to find a community of your peers who you will be able to find like somewhat shared experiences, right? I think a common theme that I've really talked about with my other fellow first-gen students is that there's a lot riding on us coming here to be at Berkeley. Like, of course, there's this aspect of wanting to do well in school and being the best scientist, engineer, social worker you can be. But then there's also this added factor of like, you're not just getting this degree for yourself. You might have family back home in the Philippines who are relying on you to maybe send money back home after you graduate, or be a role model for the cousins that are younger than you, and you're the oldest one, and you're the only kid in the family who has been able to make it past high school or college, or the first one in your family to go into a PhD. So I think in terms of community, there's a good amount of people who'd be able to commiserate with you and kind of share your experiences. Being a first generation student, just in Berkeley in general, can be quite isolating. I think that's another main theme that I've heard just talking to the people around me. But there are resources. I think at the end of the day, there are resources. And you're not alone. I think the faculty are quite supportive as well, at least the ones I've met in MCD. And overall, I feel like Berkeley is a pretty positive place to get that affirmation about not having to do this on your own.
Yeah, that's great insight. Does anyone else have any other thoughts? I can share some thoughts about being low income and how that intersects, but if anyone has that experience, I want to prioritize it. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna basically just like echo everything Alyssa said. Berkeley has actually a lot of really great resources for first gen, low income, and undocumented students. Whether you have one or any of those identities. And also, I think most people are just good people. At least in my personal experience in sociology and at Berkeley, most people want to learn from other people and support other people. So whether you want to go to those kind of institutional resources or just kind of relate to people in your department, I think that the opportunity for connection and growth is there for everybody. I've learned a lot from my peers who have identities that I don't have, so it's been overall positive. And as like a working class person, I've learned a lot and bonded a lot with other like first gen low income people, so that's been great. We have some questions now coming in. One from a little bit ago. Someone asked, I've been confronted with the idea that grad school or academia must be your calling in life to make it worth pursuing. How can we respond to this, given, oh, it kind of like disappeared. Yeah, Nathaniel put a really great answer to it actually in the chat.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, you're good. I just wanted to read in case anyone else had any other thoughts, because it's an amazing answer. But how do you respond to that feeling of being an imposter or uncertain about kind of your place in academia or what your plan during or post academia is? If Alyssa or Manpreet have any additional thoughts.
I don't see that question.
It might be an answer. Can I just throw an answer on it?
It moved to answered.
So I can,
Okay.
I guess, summarize what I was trying to say real quick. Basically, I don't think it needs to be your calling or needs to be like, oh, I've called my entire life to do grad school. A lot of my friends, including me somewhat, like think of it more as like a job, or like kind of like, okay, I need this degree to do this, so let me go to grad school. Like, and if you don't end up liking it, don't think of it as like, oh no, I wasted my life, or I made the wrong decision, or I don't know what I'm gonna do. You just spend a year or two, a few years, just kind of figuring out what you want to do, and that's always a positive experience. Yeah, like you're still learning skills while you're here. You even if like people will talk about, oh, mastering out as negative, and I don't think it's negative. If you get a PhD, you decide to master out, that's a great decision because you have a master's now. Um, a lot of us don't know what we want to do, even in grad school. So spending time here while figuring life out is not a bad thing. And I just would like you like to rephrase your like kind of rephrase your mentality as like a, oh, I don't know what I want to do as like a bad thing, and instead as more of a positive thing. That makes sense. This is your chance to figure it out.
I would add as well that you have a right to get an education, and you have a right to get a master's education, and you have a right to say, I didn't like that. You know, it doesn't have to be something that feels like if I go for it, like I'm married, I'm committed to it for the rest of my life. Maybe I think for me, it was the case that a master's was something that everybody held in high regard and looked up to. And because of that, it almost felt like unattainable, right? And so I could feel like maybe there's a lot of pressure because of that. But how cool would it be to say, I tried that and I didn't like it, and now I'm just more educated and I decided to go do something else with my education. Like, you have a right to this. You have a right to your life journey to determine what is it that feels best for you. And if a UC Berkeley master's or PhD is just something on the way, that's cool too.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks y'all for your insight. Like those are both great thoughts. Like I think there's this like firstly, I don't really fully have a plan for what I'm doing after grad school. Like, I think a lot of us say like if you're getting a PhD, I might be a professor, but I don't know what the job market's gonna be like when I get there. And I think there's sometimes like people want you to feel shame that you don't have this like 20-year plan, but like most of us are in our 20s or 30s. We're still figuring life out. This is just one part of your life. And I know it can feel like this huge decision, and there are like big parts of those choices, but um, there's no real reason to beat yourself up for, making a choice and saying, I'm just going to do what feels good. Maybe studying and learning more about this topic is what would make me feel a lot better about like what I'm trying to figure out in life. And that's fine too. And like Montpre said, if you get a master's or even get partly into the program and you're like, this sucks, it's really not worth like suffering over. Your life will keep going. So don't feel shame for being unsure or even not liking graduate school, but it's still worth trying. Moving on, we got some, now the questions are coming in. So in those moments, when you're in a position of authority, i.e. being a GSI, and you feel symptoms of imposter syndrome, what do you do? What do you do when you get a question you don't know the answer to? I can answer the second part immediately. What's worked for me is saying, I don't know the answer to that question. I tried to have that not happen as much as possible, but students are very smart, and they ask you all sorts of questions that you weren't thinking about. So I just say, that's a really good question. I'm not so sure about it. I'm gonna maybe like look into it or whatever the question is asking, and maybe we can talk about it in office hours, or I'll get back to you. I think in my experience, which is subjective, students appreciate having a GSI who is aware of their faults and doesn't pretend to know everything on planet Earth. Obviously, I try to prepare as much as I can, but students are always throwing like, curveballs. And that's the great thing about being a teacher, because they're thinking about things in ways you weren't even kind of approaching the topic from. So whenever I get that imposter syndrome, I just remember that I'm a student too. I'm always learning. That's what I'm here to do, is learn. Teaching is just part of that. So, obviously I have this position of authority, but I try to relate to my students from the beginning of the semester, being like, this is a reciprocal process. I'm here to help you. And I learned stuff from you guys, but I've never claimed to be like, I'm not a professor. I don't even have my PhD yet. So we're here to learn together. Sometimes teachers will teach things I've never read before the class. So I'm learning it for the first time too. And so I think I just try to practice an openness when I teach or have some kind of authority position. If anyone else has thoughts on teaching or other stuff, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna, I agree with everything you've been saying, Nicolette. Like, this year is my very first time being a GSI at UC Berkeley. And it's been one of the most challenging experiences that I've had here so far, just because the students that I teach ask really, really good questions. So just to piggyback off of what Nicolette mentioned before, like, I will readily admit that I don't know something, because at the end of the day, like, we're all just students learning together. And what I tend to kind of lean towards when I'm faced with a question that is kind of a curveball is that I say, like, oh, I'm not too sure of this answer. Here's my speculation, given the context of the classes that we've all attended together with the professor. What do you guys think? So it opens up an environment for a larger class discussion. And it's not like I'm saying, like, oh, I know all the answers to everything. It's asking, like, the students, based on what I think and what you've learned, what do you guys think now? And from just posing the question in this way, we've had, like, the entire hour of discussion just be surrounded by people going back and forth and sharing their ideas and opinions. And I think as opposed to just kind of regurgitating the professor's lectures, I think students appreciate it a little bit better because it stretches those brain muscles.
Awesome. Thank you, Alyssa. We've gotten a couple questions about specifically imposter syndrome during the application process, so I want to make sure we have some time to talk about that specifically. So just kind of going through multiple questions at the same time here. Do people have tips about reaching out to faculty, about letters of rec, or just advice in general about graduate school, and also just progressing with writing these materials while still feeling that imposter syndrome? How did y'all kind of work through the application process and the imposter syndrome that can come up, especially when you're applying to, like, a school like Berkeley, which sounds very scary, and it is.
I think the biggest thing is to try to talk to graduate students in that lab. Because a good PI won't judge you if you're undergrad reaching out, even if you know nothing about the project. But even if you're a little bit scared about that, graduate students will judge you even less. Like, we're happy to talk to anybody about our research, any interested undergrad students or even high school students are interested in our lab in the future. Also, we love to procrastinate. So anything that would keep me from doing my work, I would love to respond to emails, to any type of LinkedIn messages or anything. So definitely reach out to people in your lab, in the lab that you're interested in or the program you're interested in, to ask them about how they apply to that graduate school, or how they like it in their lab, or how they like work with that PI, or any tips about talking to the PI in that lab. I would say as a starting point before you talk to the professors or the faculty.
Anyone else have any tips?
I have so many tips. Okay, listen, if you're gonna do this, if you want to apply to grad school and this is like your dream, it was my dream, right? So that's why I'm saying, give it your all. Like, get creative with it. Reach out to grad students, reach out to professors, reach out to the staff at the school. Like, just get creative and reach out to whoever you can to talk to them, because the more that they know you, they're like, okay, I know Manpreet, I talked to her. That name recognition, it could be helpful when they come across your application, right? And that's just a truth of the matter. When we are familiar with folks, we tend to be nicer towards them, right? Beyond that, I would say in terms of letters of recommendation, when you're going to ask for those letters of recommendation, I recommend not just sending a cold email. I would say, hey, how you doing? Hope everything's good. Can we meet for a coffee? Or if not, can we meet for a Zoom chat? Update them on what's going on with your life, update them on why this is important to you, and ask that they maybe write certain things in your recommendation letters that maybe other folks weren't able to touch on that they can. So I recommend having a warm exchange to do that. And then beyond that, in terms of writing the application, buckle down and know that this is going to be kind of like a full-time or part-time job. Okay, this is your job before grad school, and I would really take time to, as corny as it sounds, reflect on your life. Why is this important to you? What brought you here? It's going to be an exercise of clarity for yourself, and that's going to be clear in your paper as well. It's going to help you to be able to write those statements more clearly. So those are some basic recommendations that I have for y'all.
Thank you so much, Monpreet. Echo all of that. I can share like my experience with that. I felt complete imposter syndrome the entire time. I was like, I'm so dumb and stupid, like no one's ever gonna let me into their program, but I did it anyway. And you know, I got in. So like, you really can't know. The people in your life support you and know who you are outside of your own warped like understanding of yourself. And if you know, in my most like uncomfortable moments, I have had my friends be like, what am I doing? Like, can you tell me what I'm doing here? Like, you know, how do I work through this process of applying? And they're like, you're like so built for this. So support yourself, but also support your friends if other people are trying to apply for things, even if it's not grad school. We all get this anxiety about not feeling good enough for like this fancy PhD or master's program. And in terms of recommendations specifically, something that one of my old undergrad professors would do is they were like, I'll write you a recommendation, but I want you to tell me what you think is most important. Like, what would you want me to put in the recommendation? And at first this scared me because I was like, I don't know, like, she was basically asking me to sell myself and say, like, what do you think are your best qualities? Like, what would you want the admissions committee to know? And I was like, I don't know. But I had to sit there and think about it and say, oh, like, you know, I think I'm dependable, or I think that I'm doing research that is important. And so not only will that physically help the recommender, but it also kind of strengthens yourself a little bit to be like, okay, like I do bring something to the table just like anyone else does. So it can be tough to work through, if I'm being honest, but you really have to fake it till you make it, as corny as that sounds and how often people say it. Like, you have to go to the process saying, like, I'm bringing something to the table. You know, it might not be what other people are bringing, but I'm bringing something unique because I'm a unique person who comes from a unique circumstance, and really lean into that and trust yourself. Cool. Let me just have a well, let me just address like that one of the comments in the chat. So having a warm exchange with professors and students and then not get accepted feels overwhelming and feeding into my imposter syndrome. That's super valid. It is very disappointing to get rejected from stuff, but also grad school is always reaccepting, and importantly, I will not go on too much about this longer, but grad schools will reject people for reasons that are not related to your inherent worth as a person all the time. Like I've seen cases where someone wanted to work with two professors who were both going on sabbatical for like 3 years. They might not get the program because those two substantive people aren't there anymore. It had nothing to do with their intelligence or what they were bringing, just complete crapshoot. So you can always apply again, and even by beginning a process of interacting with those professors, you can then have an even better chance next time. I wouldn't let that hold you back.
Yeah, I want to add to that. So y'all, I applied to multiple programs, CSU programs, UC programs. You would think that CSUs would be easier to get into. I was rejected from all the CSUs, and I only got into UCLA on my first round. And I applied again the second year, and I got into UC Berkeley. So exactly what Nicolette is saying. Sometimes you get rejected for reasons that really don't make sense. Logically, you would think that that doesn't really make sense, right? Like to get rejected from schools that have a higher acceptance rate. But let me tell y'all, I'm here and I'm supposed to be here and I'm able to do the coursework, and my peers and we're peers, right? Like you're meant to be there. It's not a matter of you not being worthy.
Okay, there are so many good questions. Sorry, we have to be slightly particular and strategic in how we pick them and try to go over as much as we can with all of you. So kind of good like conglomeration of some questions we've been getting are for the panelists, what resources in Berkeley have you utilized to support your well-being or just navigating imposter syndrome? Were any of like the resources that you use here like part of your decision-making process when you chose to attend Berkeley? So what are the things we all use now to kind of work through this imposter syndrome or just our well-being in general? Give it to the panel here.
Yeah, I think for me, and I kind of shared some detail on this during the spotlight that I was on yesterday. But I see being a PhD student as like a job, like Manpreet mentioned, like we're students, but also being in a PhD level is pretty much giving us like the individual ability to decide what our schedules look like within reason, because you're still working with a PI. And you're still learning. You're still in this process of kind of a transition. But what I do is try to establish a regular 9 to 5. And I do this with the students that I GSI for. I try to do this with all my meetings and appointments during the day. And I try to keep like a hard boundary between my weekdays and my weekends. Like I won't answer emails at, I don't know, Saturday at 3 in the morning from a student or a professor who needs me to do something for them. And this allows me to kind of keep a sane mindset around work. And it also kind of forces me to do my best work within those 9 to 5 hours, and try not to procrastinate, because then I can just go home and kind of turn my brain off and relax and, you know, rest and recharge for the next day. So it makes my work just a little bit more, I would say a little bit more fruitful, a little bit more detail oriented, because I know like I'm within this time crunch.
Berkeley, there's a lot of resources. The only thing is the school is very big. And so you, as a student, it might be difficult to find what those resources are. I can name some off the top of my head. Listen, I highly recommend if you're a first gen or underrepresented student, go to therapy and get your therapy scheduled, and get your therapist, get all that together if you can before you start the semester, because when around October, November, the winter blues hit, you might be rolling a little too deep in homework, and your mental health might be questionable, right? So I highly recommend therapy, which we do have a program on campus that can get you daily appointments. But if you want someone specific and long term, you know, you definitely can arrange that. There's a graduate wellness center who has therapists available as well. We, you know, myself and some colleagues in the Masters of Social Welfare program, we felt like we needed some more specific resources. We started an Oregon campus, and it's called the Mindful Masters. And we spend time getting together and feeding each other and doing sound bowl healing and yoga, like all that social work stuff, right? So, but there's plenty of things on campus. Like they have Tai Chi classes and physical education. They have boxing, they have dance, they have, there's many, many, many things. Honestly, I recommend getting the Safeway app, which is $100 for the year. And then you can order your groceries with your EBT if that's something you want to do. So there's a lot of ways to hack this. And we do have the privilege of UC Berkeley being a school with resources. And so it might be difficult to identify exactly what those are, but with some sleuthing, I'm sure you can find them and feel supported and well on campus.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Yeah, suggestions, Monpreet. And that's really cool that you started that organization. That's awesome. I will echo all of that. Getting a therapist is quite literally the first thing I did upon like reaching campus. I knew that I probably needed like an outside therapist that I could just see immediately. So I went and, with SHIP insurance from Berkeley, you can get like just prior authorization to go find a therapist in the community or go to CAPS at Berkeley. There's also like group therapy sessions for various like identity groups or just kind of things going on. Those are great. And yeah, take advantage of it ahead of time because everyone else also has the same idea and there might not be a lot of openings by like October, and that can be really sad. That's my personal experience with therapy in the university. Cool though. Another general question. Oh, also, I'm like going just before we move on the like kind of material end, because mental health is connected to our material kind of world as well. The Basic Needs Center here at Berkeley can also help you get through some tough spots with access to food and additional funding for emergency situations. So sometimes stuff just hits the fan and they can help you out with a lot of amazing things. Relatedly to mental health, there are kind of a couple of questions asking about how should I talk about bad grades or mental health challenges in my application. Will Berkeley be understanding of this? What do y'all think?
I would focus more so on the growth. So maybe if you had grades that were not so good in like the first or second year or third year, I would say, but look, I got all A's in my fourth year for these 2 semesters, right? Or if you've already graduated, I would say, and I've also taken this training program to become a stronger applicant. Or I would just have them speak to the strengths, and that way they could see the arc of your journey is upward. And don't beat yourself up. Like, you're not the only person that had some poor grades, okay? Like, it's okay, it's all right. And it's not even reflective necessarily of your potential as a student. Like, maybe you just don't learn that way, and people understand that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with everything Manpreet has been saying too. Like these programs, no matter where you apply to, want to see your growth. And inherent to PhD, master's, higher education, you have to be someone who is willing to persevere and be resilient and overcome many obstacles. So if you show these admissions committees that you are determined to be in this program, this is what I've done to accommodate for the bad grades I've gotten in the past. This is what I've done to make up for classes that are necessary for the degree, but I haven't taken yet. That's what they want to see. They want you to showcase those personality traits that would allow you to not just start the degree, but finish it. Because these programs see you as a person. Yes, they want you for you and the diversity you're bringing, but also they see you as an investment. They're going to teach you everything they know. They're going to give you these resources in the lab, in your office, on the bench, etc. And where are you going to take that information? How are you going to showcase that your growth is going to be translated into, bringing the skill set that Berkeley is going to give you into the future and be someone that's innovative.
Yeah, like there's quite a few questions in the chat where people are saying, oh, they don't have the best grades, they don't have the reach experience, they didn't go to the best college. And I think like the one thing I would say is that a good PI and a good program wouldn't care. Like I guess exposed a few times in the chat, like your clout of your undergraduate is not as important as like the skills and your persistence that, like a lot of us went to smaller schools for our undergrad. A lot of us didn't do the research we're doing now, didn't do research at all. And I would more definitely in your personal statement speak to more about your skills personally rather than relying on the school for like, oh, name recognition or anything like that. Because in the long run, that's not as important as what you know.
Yeah, I echo all of that. I know in the sociology department, a large portion of us don't have degrees, like undergrad degrees from like Ivy Leagues or like really fancy, like top tier research universities. Like what I think most any good admissions committee is looking for is your ability, your aptitude to learn, your ability to persevere, and just how you're going to approach the kind of learning experience that is a PhD. And kind of like they said, like Alyssa said, you are an investment to them, but not even in a cynical way. Like by choosing you to be in their program, they are saying, we're going to give you money, we're going to give you time because we trust that you can persevere and make it through this program. So at the end of the day, you can have as much book learning as possible, but like, no matter how fancy it is, you still have to be able to apply that. And that's what they're looking for more than did you go to Harvard or whatever. I know lots of folks in grad school who went to like CSUs or other places that aren't seen as like as good or whatever, which is not even true. So I wouldn't let that hold you back. And also, so many people have bad mental health and bad grades in undergrad, which is an indictment of our education system. So don't beat yourself up about that. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So let's see if there are so many good questions. Someone specifically asked me about sociology. I'm not going to answer that just because of time, but please email me. I'm on the Diversity and Community Fellows page. If anyone's interested in social sciences, please reach out, and I'd love to talk to you about that personally. We've got some questions about, oh geez. Sorry, I'm trying to like kind of put these into like maybe one big question. I can cover a couple. Let's see. So I guess we have some questions about, let me just pick one. Sorry to all the amazing questions. People have asked about how diversity is at Berkeley. Is your program diverse? How do you stay connected with your community at Berkeley? Do you feel comfortable in like your authentic selves? And if you have had problems, do you feel supported in dealing with them about that? I mean, I can share a quick thought. I haven't had any terrible like macroaggressions at Berkeley. I do think, there are always going to be people in bad faith, but I do think generally most people here are trying to be good people who don't want to actively discriminate against other people, but microaggressions can happen. And in most situations, like I've felt that my department is at least supportive and willing to like work through those issues and hear especially its marginalized students out. So if there aren't kind of, avenues in like your programs or even in your undergrad programs, you should feel empowered to make those kind of avenues. You should never feel marginalized in your own program. And I can say that that hasn't been the case for my department. I can't speak for everyone at Berkeley. But there is, I have had a good time in terms of that. And I think people are generally trying to be understanding of people who are different than them. But if anything, my department has like a system where if you have a problem interpersonally with a faculty member or another student, like they're willing to look out for you and make sure things are right.
I'll say that, my reality is that when I got to Cal, especially in the Masters of Social Welfare program, I was not quite prepared to learn that many of my colleagues had come from private schools and very wealthy backgrounds. And so that was a little bit of culture shock for me. And to really see the racial disparity within the folks who came from wealth and like private schools and things like that. I'll echo what Nicolette has said as well regarding, I think most folks, they don't want to be disrespectful here. And they try to be respectful, and there is an understanding of like respect for people of color within my program. Like, folks want to hear us out and things like that. Um, and I don't know how it is in the other schools, but in our school, we kind of cause a problem. Like anytime we don't like something, we're like talking to the dean or we're talking to the professor. We're like, this assignment is not feasible, or, we don't like that y'all don't have this or whatever. So we kind of cause a ruckus. And I recommend that you all do that as well, not by yourself, hopefully, so all the blame doesn't go on you, but build solidarity amongst your cohort and do that, because these institutions are here to serve us. And so that's kind of how we do it, and that's been my experience.
Kind of echoing that, and also kind of like responding to a lot of these questions at once. Kind of remember that in graduate school, you are like the asset for the school. Like most research or all UC Berkeley pretty much can't get done without all of us, all of you, everybody applying here every year. Like we do the majority of like the work on campus and everything. So remember that when you're applying, don't think of it as like, oh, I hope they pick me. You're kind of hoping like, okay, let's see if I'm a good fit for this one, or will I be a better fit somewhere else? They're trying to get you as much as you're trying to get them, because they need you pretty much. So that's kind of like a great way to think about it, to get rid of a lot of imposter syndrome, thinking that you are really a necessary part of a university or academia in general.
Absolutely. Great points from both of you. And Alyssa, if you have anything, jump in. I don't want to cut you off. I think just one more thing. There's a great last question I want to ask, but I think my last question, based on a lot of what I'm seeing, is how have y'all dealt with maybe imposter syndrome in terms of like access to resources or with funding? Because I don't think it's a secret that we're not paid, a ton of money to live where we live. So how do we as graduate students deal with maybe the kind of feeling of living in a place where many people are well off, but we don't always make an income that kind of represents the labor that we put into the university? How do you work through that kind of feeling of want, or like what resources do we have on campus that we can utilize in terms of needing material resources?
Yeah, well, I will say now that there are a good number of fellowships and supplemental funding that you can apply to through the Office of Graduate Diversity. An example of this was like in my first year of my program, I was a peer-to-peer STEM fellow. They gave us a little extra bit of spending money for the year. And then now I'm a first year diversity and community fellow, which is kind of a step up from P2P. And they also gave us a good bit of funding as well. I believe it's like an extra $3,000 per semester. So there is money here. You just kind of have to dig for it and ask around, because in some cases there are some offices or some groups that don't know how to spend the money that they're given by Big Berkeley. And you could be that person who takes that scholarship and runs with it and uses it to fund the research or the work that you're trying to do on campus. In terms of just kind of dealing with running into so many like people from wealthy backgrounds or just straight up rich people on campus. Yeah, I like to see myself as I'm investing in myself. And I just speaking personally, I didn't grow up with like a lot of spending money. Even in my undergrad and my master's, I had to work as an EMT, or in my master's, I had to be a TA for the entire time that I was there to be able to pay rent. And so, I don't know, maybe my perspective is a little bit different, because here at Berkeley, I'm just paid to do research. And while it isn't the best amount of funding, it's better than I have had in the past. I am able to find extra resources of funding that can give me a couple extra thousand spending dollars in my pocket, which is great. And just acknowledging the fact that your life doesn't end after you get your PhD. It's going to open so many doors for you, not just the degree, but networking with so many different people. So you're investing in yourself. You are someone worthwhile. And this is your time to really build that foundation for yourself.
Okay, we only got a couple minutes left, but I think there's one wholesome question. If one of you wants to tackle it, we probably don't have time for all of us. But does anyone have any, like, what were your memorable or best pep talks or affirmations people have told you to help with imposter syndrome? Like, what do you tell yourself? What have other people told you that you've really taken to heart?
I remember I was really struggling my first semester of my master's program, and I was able to get hooked up with a mentor on campus through the School of Social Work. And when I talked to her, she had shared like how much she had been struggling as well her first year, like to the point of actually being diagnosed with like exhaustion in the hospital. So, and she shared with me that what's going on is, I believe it's called swimming duck syndrome, where it seems like everybody's doing okay on the surface, but you look underwater and everybody's paddling, right? Trying to make it across the pond or whatever. And so that really stuck with me. Like everybody, me every day, Abel, I feel you. So everybody is kind of doing their best to be here, and it's a big deal for a lot of people to be here, and everyone's trying to play it cool, and a lot of the times they don't feel so cool. So just know that you're doing okay. There's nothing wrong with you. Don't make it a problem with you. If anything, Nicolette said, it's an indictment of our educational system, right? And yet we're using this to empower ourselves or as a means to an end or whatever it may be. So you're good, you're worthy, you belong here. And with some finesse, you can hopefully make it work for you as well.
Thank you so much, Monbrief. Just want to finish up. Thanks everyone for attending. The Grad Diversity Admissions Fair is not over yet, so hope you'll join us again tomorrow for tomorrow's plenary on navigating graduate school as minoritized students. And if you have questions, don't forget that we as diversity and community fellows are available to help, or you can reach out to the Office of Grad Diversity Admissions teams. Thanks everyone for coming. I hope you have a great rest of your week.